Hi there, President Davidson here, welcoming you to the first episode of Common Grounds, a new video series that we're doing that's all about honest conversations, a chance to dig into some decisions and initiatives and issues, all the things that are shaping our university, and to connect with people leading that work. So for our first episode, I'm sitting down with the one and only Jim Carpenter, our Chief Financial Officer and Vice President for Administration and Finance, to talk about MSU Denver's budget, our priorities, our plans for the future. So go ahead and grab your favorite cup of coffee and join me for Common Grounds. So let's get started. Hi, Jim. How you doing?
Good morning.
What are you drinking there?
Just black coffee.
Just black coffee?
Keep it simple from the...
You got to have a lot of caffeine to work on the budget, don't you?
That's true.
So let's start, talking a lot about federal funding and state funding. How does it all work? How does it all come in to the system?
Okay. I mean, MSU Denver's budget really is funded primarily by two sources. I mean, the biggest one is tuition, and then the second is state funding. And really that's almost the entire budget. And it's pretty close to 50-50 between the two.
So the state gives us money per student, right? So if our enrollment goes down, our revenue goes down.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
So why? So that's could be a bit of a spiral, right?
It certainly could be. I mean, I also think of those things as kind of self-reinforcing too. I mean, financial success is student success.
Exactly.
And financial success gives us the resources that we need to be able to support our students.
Yeah. So when our students are succeeding, then we're able to reinvest that revenue into things that help our students and our faculty and our staff thrive, right?
That's right.
So talk a little bit about what's happening right now, this particular year. People are hearing, oh, it's going to be a tough year. I feel like we say that every year, like it's always kind of a tough year. And then in the end, we get more money than we think we're going to get. But what is really happening this year that is different?
I mean, the state is facing a really challenging budget environment. And while we have felt that to some degree in the past, I think what we're seeing right now, it's just a different order of magnitude. That's driven by some of the federal policy changes that are really having a significant impact on the state budget. We saw it this year, even in this current year's budget, we saw a reduction after the budget had been passed.
So can you talk a little bit about what we are doing and the things that we need to do and how we can say, oh, it's a scary year on the one hand, but we're doing okay on the other?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's exactly right. We are in that place where it is a scary year, I think, when we look at the state funding, and we don't rely on those federal dollars the way these other institutions do. And because of that, we are able to navigate this a little bit differently than I think some of them have. And so we do see some impacts that are very real on some of those on some of those grants and some of those programs that have been funded in the past by the state. But those are relatively small as comparison to our entire budget.
To the entire budget. Whereas like some of these research institutes, like half of their budget is federally funded research, and they're paying for infrastructure like labs and as well as people. Yeah. And so one of the ways this is coming out at us is when it comes to like the difference between a hiring freeze and a hiring, tell us a little bit more about how you're thinking about that.
Yeah, and so we have been fortunate that we have not had to institute a hiring freeze, and like you said, many institutions have. The state has done that. They've been in that since August.
City, too.
The city is doing that, that's right. And we have not had to do that. At the same time, we have to prepare ourselves for challenging budget times. Both this year, we've already seen a reduction in this year's budget, and we anticipate challenging budgets in the next few years. And so because of that, we're looking at ways of having increased scrutiny of some of our hiring. Not to say that we would be entering into a hiring freeze, but that as positions open up, we want to make sure we're taking a really hard look at those to say, okay, well, what happens if we didn't fill this, or what are the other options here, or maybe what if we did this in a slightly different way?
Or what if we delayed a little bit, or something?
Exactly. Yeah. We could do that, and I think applying that level of scrutiny, recognizing where we are right now with some of the challenges that we're facing at the state level.
We have solicited questions in advance. That's the way we're going to do this. So we have a couple, and then we'll just address two for now, and then I think some of the other ones will get recapped in the early bird when we talk about this thing. So this week we have a question from Matthew in ITS.
Okay.
He asks, MSU Denver values access. I hear that part of access is keeping tuition affordable. I also hear narratives about perceived friction between stewardship and care, where budget decisions can feel at odds with student-centered values. So how might we reframe that narrative to show that budget stewardship is a form of access work?
Yeah, I love this question because I think the way that ends is exactly right. I think budget stewardship absolutely is a form of access work. You know, I mean, as I think about this, let me go back to kind of my background on this. I mean, professionally, I'm a public finance person, but personally, I come from a family of educators. I mean, my grandma was a teacher and a school principal and administrator, you know, in local school districts. My mom's a teacher. I've got 2 sisters who are teachers. My wife is a teacher. I mean, I come from this place of educators, right? And a real focus on students and on faculty and on teachers. And when we're doing our budget work, the focus has to always start there. It always starts with what is the impact on students. So how do we get there with that? I think, you know, I talked a little bit about transparency earlier. I think that's number one. We get there with transparency because when we have transparent budgets, that allows all the leaders across the university who are delivering these exceptional services to say, okay, how do we do these as in the best way possible to deliver those services to students? I think the efficiency piece that you highlighted in your budget charge is really important from an access standpoint because that means the student experience is better. There are fewer points of friction if I'm a student going through my university education here, and that gives us both more resources to dedicate to students, and it also drives affordability. And affordability is access. That's one of our key access levers. So when I think about what is defined here as tension, I really don't see it as tension. I think budget stewardship is a tool for access work.
Yeah, very good. We have another great question from Anne in the Department of Social Work. In seeing the President's charge for being creative and efficient with our constricted budget, can you tell us what financial levers may have the most impact and/or the ability to move? And she says, I think we're super creative and aim to be efficient, but we don't always know what things cost or save or where we might have the power to change things.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would start in thinking about this question with where you started earlier and thinking about enrollment and how enrollment really drives our resources. Because, you know, that's the first piece is when you think about the resources that we're going to have available. Those are primarily driven by how many students do we have who are coming through here and how successful are those students? What's the success of the experience that we're providing to those students? And that drives resources which we can then use and we can further invest as we've talked about in the flywheel. So I think that's the first piece of this. The second piece then is how do we identify areas for efficiency across the university? I know one of your passions is leadership and really making sure we have distributed leadership across the university and really empowering our leaders then to identify areas where we can find efficiencies. And then I think the third thing, and the question talks about this, about, well, it's hard to know where we can save. Again, that comes back to budget transparency. That's really where we continue to lean in on making sure that leaders really understand, here's your budget, here's what the actuals look like on that, where might there be some opportunities, where might we be able to find some savings, and where might we be able to find some areas that we can invest. And so I think, again, budget transparency is really key.
Well, and this is where your team has really lifted the game, I think. I mean, we still have work to do and more transparency and more empowerment. But we weren't even able to do that before. We didn't have the data. We didn't have the systems. And so I really applaud you and your team for the progress that you've made, for the passion you have for the mission here. Y'all, we are really fortunate to have Jim Carpenter as our CFO and the team that he's built and the process he's putting in place. It may be a challenging year, but I think we're in really good hands. So thank you.
Thank you.